Welcome to KetoMealsAndRecipes.com. This video will demonstrate how to make an amazing substitute for Mexican corn tortillas and hard taco shells, and this recipe is also keto, sugar-free, and gluten-free. The macronutrient ratio for this recipe is 3.2 to 1, with 4.8 grams of total carbs, of which 4.4 grams is soluble and insoluble fiber, and leaves only 0.4 grams of net carbs per serving. The great thing I like about this recipe specifically is that a lot of the ingredients are very nutrient dense. So let's begin. First, combine the dry ingredients, which are almond flour, flaxseed meal, coconut flour, psyllium husk. Then stir to combine. Add the salt and also pre-melt the coconut oil. Then add the glucomannan, which acts as a binding agent and adds a lot more fiber to this recipe as well. Stir again, pour the water into your mixing bowl and stir to combine with the dry ingredients. Then pour in the melted coconut oil and use your whisk or your hands to mix the ingredients. After kneading the dough, let it rest for 30 to 60 minutes. This will allow the water to be absorbed by the dry ingredients and will make the dough much easier to work with. After the dough has rested, form a ball and cut it into 6 or 8 wedges, depending what size tortillas you're making. Take one of the wedges and roll it into a ball. I would recommend you work on a parchment-lined work surface or use a silicone mat. Then cover the ball with parchment and use a rolling pin to press it into a very thin layer. Remove the top parchment and press out the shape. After pressing out the shape, remove the ragged dough, but save this for another tortilla. How many tortillas you can make with this dough will depend on the size of the tortillas you want to make and how thin you roll out each tortilla. In this first example, I'm using a pot lid that is 24 centimeters or 9.5 inches in diameter. So I made about 6 extra large tortillas, which are great for making quesadillas. Because these large tortillas are more fragile, after rolling them out, leave them on the parchment. Transfer the entire thing onto a baking sheet. There's no need to lift the tortillas off the parchment. Before placing the baking sheet in the oven, make sure that your oven has been preheated to 400 degrees Fahrenheit or 200 degrees Celsius. But while it's baking, keep an eye on the tortillas as each oven is a bit different. Bake for about 8 minutes until they just start to turn golden in color. In the next part of the demonstration, I used a bowl with a diameter of 20 centimeters or 7 3/4 inches, and I made about 8 tortillas. I usually make this size for the tortillas to be used for soft tacos or burritos. You can bake these tortillas in the oven as you did for the larger ones, or you can pan fry them on your stovetop. Preheat your skillet, and when the skillet is very hot, butter it. Then place your tortilla in the skillet and let it fry for about 1 to 2 minutes, and then flip the tortilla with a wide spatula and let it fry the second side for 1 to 2 minutes. Because you're using butter, these tortillas will have a nice buttery taste to them. Before I forget, I'd like to mention that this tortilla crust can also be used to make a personal pan pizza. This crust, as opposed to the pita crust, has a bit of a more multi-grain taste and texture. Now, to have some fun, I'll make the hard taco shells like the old El Paso stand and stuff shells. When you're pressing out the dough, I would recommend that you make it relatively thin so that the shells will be nice and crispy and have a good crunch to them. You should preheat your oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit or 200 degrees Celsius. For the hard taco shell cutouts, I used a pot lid that was 15 centimeters or 6 inches in diameter. I can usually make about 12 hard taco shells, but how many shells you get will depend again on how thinly you spread out the dough and what size you make your cutouts. Before placing your tortillas on the rack, lay down the parchment paper and then place the tortilla on the parchment paper so that the exact center is horizontal over the 3 rungs and the rest is hanging down on either side. If you don't use a parchment liner, the tortillas will stick and break when you try to remove them. I make the flat part of the hard shell about 3 to 4 centimeters or 1.5 inches wide, which, by the way, is exactly the distance if you use 3 rungs of the oven rack. For this video, I use this rack because it was much easier to demonstrate with, but I usually do place them directly on my oven rack. Place the rack with the tortillas in the middle position of your preheated oven and bake for 8 to 10 minutes, or until the tortillas are a deep golden brown, but make sure they're not burning. The shells will be soft when you take them out of the oven. To have them cool, don't remove them right away, but suspend the rack by placing 4 tall glasses underneath it and letting them air dry on your counter. If I took them off the rack before they hardened completely, the sides would lean towards the inside and make the opening more narrow. I placed either a crumpled aluminum foil roll to prevent the narrowing of the opening, or I use my spice container to prevent the sides from collapsing as I'm showing here. Another example this tortilla dough can be used for is to make taco cups. You make them in the same way you do the tortillas, except you use a smaller diameter cutout, and by using the underside of the silicone muffin pan to shape the cups. If you don't have a silicone muffin pan and are using a metal one, make sure you line the bottom of the muffin pan with parchment. Otherwise, when you try to remove the cups, they will stick and probably crack as you try to remove them. Make sure that your oven has been preheated to 400 degrees Fahrenheit or 200 degrees Celsius. Place in the middle position of your preheated oven and bake for 8 to 10 minutes. So do try this recipe and taste for yourself how great the tortillas, the hard taco shells, and the cups really taste. Enjoy. Until next time, thank you for watching. The link for the printable recipe is in the description below. Your feedback is very important to me, so please press the like button, share this recipe with your friends, and let me know your thoughts by leaving a comment below.